You'll forgive me, I hope. Those of you who have had me in class will know that I like to walk around, and so I'm not going to stand in front of the podium. I'm deeply honored to be here. When Jessica asked me, I am ashamed to say, I had no idea that Clarkson had a tradition of last lectures. I quickly discovered that it is a relatively recent series of events, and that all of the previous last lectures are available online. But in trying to frame my message for you today, I did not look at any of them. I wanted this message to be mine. Some of the things I do have to say, there's a little bit of overlap with what Laura Ettinger just said. The other question I faced was, how am I going to frame my message? And I decided to do it with pictures. These are all my pictures. Here are two photographs that I took last summer in Paris of one of the most famous statues in the world. This is The Thinker by Auguste Rodin. It's possible you have seen The Thinker in other locations, and it is entirely plausible that you have done so. There are many different thinkers, all made by him and his associates, and different sizes. There are tabletop versions and there are gigantic versions like this particular one. I included these pictures to make 2 points. Your education here at Clarkson has prepared you, at least in part, but only in part, for what comes next. No education can completely prepare you for the next phase of your life. But it has, I hope, if you take anything away from your time here, it is that you have learned at least one way to do something that this statue, despite its name, can never do, and that is to actually think. The next phase of your life will teach you other ways to think. And in a few years from now, nobody will care what grades you got here. What will matter is how well you do on the subsequent phases of your life. One of the other messages from that slide that I wanted to share with you was that I want you to use your ability to think to do something creative and something that gives you great joy. And this is a picture that gives me great joy. It is a painting that hangs in my lab. I did not make the painting, but the painting would not exist if I had not asked it to exist. I bought a painting from the artist. Her name is Kimber Cho, and she lives in Montreal, a few years ago. And when I went to pick up the painting from her house, I had formulated a plan to ask her to paint something for me that reflects in part what I am, and that is a chemical process engineer. And so I provided her with some photographs that I had obtained from the web. I asked permission to use them, and she painted this picture for me. But she was so afraid that I would not like it that she painted another one. I love them both. I bought them both. They hang in my lab. They hung in my office for a few years, but then I acquired some other paintings. One of the neat things she did with this painting was to paint it in a square pattern so that I can turn it around, and it's still meaningful. I cannot tell you how much joy it gives me to have original art hanging on my walls, but art that specifically would not exist if I had not asked it to come into being somehow. This is a painting by Renée Taukid. She is an artist from Kingston. I met her because I bought one of her paintings it was on exhibition in a barn in between, a small town in between Kingston and Ottawa. And I asked her to paint something. We had some spaces on the walls that needed filling. I told her about the sizes of the spaces. I didn't tell her what to paint. This is one of the paintings she made. She made 3. I bought all of them. Back to Rodin. These are the burghers of Calais. Their story is not a happy one. I'm not going to tell you their story, take too much time, but it does not have a happy ending. But my point in showing this particular picture is to tell you that you will most likely be working in teams. This is a team that had a shared vision and a common purpose. I hope that you have the opportunity to work for people and with people with whom you can share your vision, or that you can adapt yours to theirs. If you are not able to share your vision with those people that you work with, perhaps it is time to find a different team to play for. Here is an entirely different team, but a team nonetheless. This is the Royal Air Force Aerobatic Display Team, the Red Arrows. I took this photograph at an air show in the Netherlands in 2002. I used to have a part-time job over there, and as luck would have it, this was happening on one of the weekends I was there. This is a team in which every single member has complete and absolute trust in every other member. They require their teammates to do exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment in every single moment, and if that doesn't happen, bad things will take place. You must work with people that you trust completely. If that is not the case, find a different team to play for. This is a photograph I took in 1978. It is New Orleans through the steamed-up window of a bus. I am completely sure that everybody in this audience has seen the object in this photograph. Many of you will have seen it in person. The rest of you have seen it in photographs, although whether it was the focus of the photograph or not, I have no idea. Perhaps you didn't even notice it was there in some cases. It is the Washington Monument in DC. I'm reasonably sure that many of you have never seen it look quite like that. And this is the unfocused reflection of the sun in a camera lens that I had placed on the ground in front of me. The reason I show these three pictures is to remind you, not everybody sees the world the same way that you do. You undoubtedly know people with a similar perspective to yourself. You know people who have a different perspective. But I ask you to try to look at the world through somebody else's eyes. I do not ask you to agree with their perspective, but only to try to understand it. Do not, please, spend your lives looking at your cell phones or other electronic devices. You do not know what you will miss. This was taken in the Botanical Gardens in Paris last summer. I tell you, Paris, I have never seen so many people taking selfies. If you look at the picture bottom left, there are actually two different groups taking selfies of themselves at the same time. And the picture bottom left and the picture on the right, I took seated in exactly the same place. I simply pointed my camera in two different directions. As I said, Paris is the city of selfies. This happened right in front of me. I pulled up my camera and started taking photographs. This is the best one of the sequence. Most of the others happened too quickly and I couldn't get my camera in focus in time. Please remember, please try not to be so self-absorbed. The world does not revolve around you, not even on your wedding day. Do something different to disconnect. Pick up a book. Take it to the park and read. Read a book on economics. Read a book on history. And yes, I really was planning to say that before I knew that our other speakers were economists and historians. It is completely true that the books on my bedside right now, one is on economics and one is on history. This is one of my favorite places in the whole world. These are the woods behind where my aunt used to live in the Netherlands. It is a wonderful place for walking meditation, something I have done more times than I can possibly count. My aunt died a few years ago. And the farmer who owned the property surrounding hers bought her place and knocked down the beautiful farmhouse in which she lived. I have no more relatives there now. I have no reason to go back there. I have this photograph and my memories, and I hope they suffice. I took this picture on Saturday, specifically for this event. I wanted a photograph that made the particular point I want to make with it, and I did not have my camera with me at the time, and I did not know what picture I was going to use. So, as luck would have it, I happened to be in a store in Kingston, and they sold jigsaw puzzles, and they had out there a table for people to help put together one of their puzzles. And there were two young men working on this puzzle. I didn't have my camera. I borrowed a cell phone. I asked them if I could take their photograph doing the picture, and I emailed the picture to myself, and here it is. My message for this picture is, solve a puzzle. Those of you going to graduate school, especially those of you doing a PhD, will find that you don't even know what the picture looks like. You have to figure out what the picture looks like, then you cut it into pieces and then put it back together, and that will be your thesis. But all of the rest of you will have ample opportunity to solve puzzles. I can tell you from my own consulting experience, from my friends in industry, that it is tremendously rewarding to help people solve problems that actually matter and that change people's lives. So solve a puzzle as often as you can. Pick up a paintbrush or a sketch pad. The young lady on the left is in Paris, the young man on the right is in Amsterdam. As was the case with many of my pictures today, most of the people in them didn't know they were being photographed. I love this picture. 3 men in a boat. Did you know there was a book with that name written many decades ago? 3 Men in a Boat. How many times do you see something like this in your life? The answer in my case is once. This was taken from the deck of my house. I live on Norwood Pond. And I looked out of the window one day, and there were these 3 men rowing by, fishing. I grabbed my camera, ran onto my deck, and I took this photograph. It became North Country Public Radio's pick of the day. My point in showing this picture is it's a placeholder for another message, which is this. There are people and books that you can read that will tell you to go out and find opportunities. But I am going to tell you that the opportunities are all out there. What you have to do is recognize them and take advantage of them when you see them. This is a picture I took in 1978, along with some of the other 1978 pictures. It's from my original trip to the United States that made me decide that I wanted to live here. It's obvious you know what this is. It may not be obvious as to how I created it, and I don't have the time to explain it here. Today, with digital cameras and computers, creating something like this is a piece of cake. But it wasn't easy in 1978 with a mechanical film winding camera. But this is a single frame, one shot, well, not one shot, it's a double exposure, but it's a single frame, and you have to trick a camera into doing something like this. The reason I show that is to ask you to do something different, something that you haven't done before, something that you don't know whether it is going to work or not. 3 years ago, I bought a piano keyboard. Not this piano keyboard. This was in an antique store that I happened to be passing when I did have my camera with me. And I started to teach myself to play the piano. And I did that because for many years, I used to ask myself this question from time to time, and it is a question I want you to ask yourselves every few years. What is it that you would most like to do that you don't do or can't do? And for me, for the longest time, the answer was play the piano. There are a lot of very musical people in my family. Heck, maybe I'm even one of them. I didn't know. And I didn't try. When my parents tried to get me to play instruments when I was young, I resisted and stopped as soon as I possibly could. But then I discovered that I actually do like piano music, and I wanted to be able to play, but I didn't do anything about it for 20 years or more until 3 years ago. I don't play much, I don't play enough, but it gives me great joy to try. So I want you to ask yourself that question, but then to take the next step and put in place a plan to do something about it. I included this picture partly because I just like it, and partly because it does have a message for you. I have a message for you, and that is to learn to be present. To be present, especially when you're dealing with other people. That means different things to different people, but one of the things it means to me is that when you are with other people, interacting with other people, give them your attention. Many of you will spend a significant part of your future lives in meetings with other people professionally. You will find that if you give them your attention, your meetings will go quicker and will be more productive. In your personal relationships, you will find that being present with other people will immensely improve the quality of those relationships. Here is a couple who were not being present with one another. And yes, they were a couple, or they are, or they were at the time at least. This photograph I took in Milan airport in 2004. They also did not know they were being filmed by me. They came together, but at some point, when I took this photograph, they were actually sat on opposite sides of the back-to-back seats, rows of seats you see in airports all over the world. And they weren't talking to each other anymore. It looked to me like they'd had a fight or some kind of disagreement. Notice what just happened there. I told you my story about these two people. I have no idea what their story is. Maybe they had a perfectly good reason to sit on opposite sides of a row of seats. My strongest possible recommendation to you today is to not make up stuff about people, and that isn't intended as a political commentary. It's simply intended to tell you that this is a way to improve your relationships with people. Don't make up stuff about them. Stuff that you don't know is true. Especially the people closest to you. Learn to be, in your conversations with people, learn to be an honest mirror of what they say. In case you haven't noticed, this picture is not an honest mirror. Do not distort what they say to you. This is a reflection in a window in San Francisco. I am actually in that photograph. Hard to see, but I am there. Be as flat a mirror as you possibly can be. This is the flattest mirror I could find in my photo collection. It's not completely flat, but you can at least recognize things. You can see the buildings in the bottom, and you can see the car parking lot behind that. This is the John Hancock Tower in Boston. At least it used to be. I think it has another name now. And this is my last picture. Three weeks ago, my oldest son got married. I was there, of course, with my camera, of course. At one point, just before the ceremony itself, he got together with his best man, his younger brother, and his groomsmen in a huddle, and I picked up my camera and started taking pictures. This is the best one that I got. Most of the time, I had a lot of difficulty taking these pictures because my eyes filled with tears. He told his friends, I love you. So my last piece of advice is to tell someone you love them while you still can, while they can still hear you. Thank you.